Anton. First try. Here we go.
So Helskate is an skateboarding combat roguelike. You know, you're in some kind of afterlife and nobody really knows what's going on. It's a more kind of magical realism sort of afterlife, if you can mix those two in the sense of you have to like pay rent, and it's kind of just like the real world but crappier.
Too slow.
And the main character, Anton Falcon, is a skateboarder, and he's been put into this place, and everyone is kind of like missing their memory, but there is a very specific reason for it, and something that's happened that's caused that, and that's something that gets unfurled throughout the story.
Luckily for you, your deck is a weapon. Literally.
I'm Steve Swink, the game director for Helskate. Back in a former life, worked on Tony Hawk Underground, which is kind of how I ended up working on this skateboarding game today. I also wrote a book called Game Feel, the game designer's guide to virtual sensation, which is kind of code agnostic and just about the tactile sensation that you get when you're controlling a video game with some sort of input device. And it's still used in lots of schools today and is relatively well regarded as I understand it, so that's great. So Helskate is an skateboarding combat roguelike. And what we wanted to do was take mechanics of classic arcade skateboarding games, and we wanted to find a different context for them. And one of the main inspirations behind that is because when I worked on Tony Hawk Underground, I thought to myself, man, we really have a lot of stat points and a lot of like kind of RPG mechanics and a lot of like really expressive and beautiful gameplay. And I think a lot of people didn't play these games because if they missed the first wave of getting hooked on Tony Hawk 1, Tony Hawk 2, there's a pretty big barrier. And like I actually helped build a tutorial for Tony Hawk Underground, and I was like, you guys, this is not a great tutorial. Like, this is really not onboarding people who have never played the game before. And when we sat down to like brainstorm the design of these games, by the fifth one, which was Tony Hawk Underground, it was basically like, what are we going to add? And that had worked pretty well, I think, up through 3. But we ended up in this place where we have all these barrier mechanics and all these things that are really difficult to get into with manuals and grinds. And then now you have like run out and you have, you know, all this kind of crazy stuff. And I just thought like it'd be really cool to kind of take that all that core feel and what's really good about skateboarding games, and you create something out of nothing by like using what tricks you want to do and you know, constructing your line around that. So all that stuff is just so beautiful and cool. And lots of people have tried to kind of grab that and put it into other games, but I think it really loses a lot. And what I really want to do is take that and pull it out of the context of a realistic skateboarding game, but keep all the things that make it feel really good and what's really good about it. So for example, there have been a lot of games coming out which are inspired by these kinds of mechanics, but which have no grind meters. You know, they have no meters that require you to balance. I actually think it's really important to force you to have to balance on everything. So we've got meters on everything, and we have even some mechanics with balance meters that aren't in the Tony Hawk games. And I just thought if we took all of that stuff, we sort of pulled it out of the context that it's been in and just put it in this other context. So it's like a roguelike. So everything gets refreshed every time. We take the idea of stat points. You build your stat points every single run. You get a new fresh start where you are starting with the worst balance meters, but then very quickly you beat the first boss or you do an optional challenge and all of a sudden you get a stat point. And instead of having 10 levels of stat points, we have 3. So it's like if you take a balance meter upgrade, it really juices you. And so what we're trying to do is build this system out of these pieces that I saw that I thought would work well in this other context. And like so far, you know, returns have been very interesting and cool.
Skating is pain.
Wake up every morning on the wrong side.
We have this thing called trick effects. So you gain a trick tape, and that trick tape teaches you how to do this trick in a certain way. And so it teaches you to do a kickflip, but now your kickflip shoots a chain out of it. I like a roguelike that goes down real smooth. What you get is this feel that's really different from a lot of third-person action games because you're really moving. We would like you to play an average run should be no more than an hour. That's kind of like the gold standard for roguelikes. And I think, you know, if you have a nice variation in between there so you can beat the game very quickly if you pop off or if you optimize your build for that, you know, you can get in there, you can beat the game in 60 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. We have a ton of story content planned.
Look at yourself. Your wing, your arm, what do you think happens when that gets to your head?
We would like for you, if you play this game, to be able to then go play Tony Hawk 1+2 or Thug Pro. Like, shout out to the Thug Pro community. It's a skating game, but don't be afraid. Come on in.